A former U.S. State Department official in October 2001 described Bosnia and Herzegovina as a safe haven for terrorists, and asserted that militant elements of the former Sarajevo government were protecting extremists, some with ties to Osama bin Laden. In 1997, Rzeczpospolita, one of the largest Polish daily newspapers, had reported that intelligence services of the Nordic Polish SFOR brigade suspected that a center for training terrorists from Islamic countries was located in the Basina Donja village near Maglaj in Bosnia and Herzegovina. In 1992, hundreds of volunteers joined an Al-Mujahideen unit called El Mujahid in an abandoned hillside factory, a compound with a hospital and prayer hall. According to Middle East intelligence reports, bin Laden financed small convoys of recruits from the Arab world through his businesses in Sudan. Among them was Karim Said-Otmani, who was identified by authorities as the document forger for a group of Algerians accused of plotting the bombings in the United States. He is a former roommate of Ahmed Ressam, the man arrested at the Canada-United States border in mid-December 1999 with a car full of nitroglycerin and bomb-making materials. He was convicted of colluding with Osama bin Laden by a French court. A Bosnian government search of passport and residency records, conducted at the urging of the United States, revealed other former Mujahideen who were linked to the same Algerian group or to other groups of suspected terrorists, and had lived in the area 100 kilometers (60 miles) north of Sarajevo, the capital, in the past few years. Khalil al-Deek was arrested in Jordan in late December 1999 on suspicion of involvement in a plot to blow up tourist sites. A second man with Bosnian citizenship, Hamid H., lived in Canada at the same time as Otmani and worked for a charity associated with Osama bin Laden. In its June 26, 1997 report on the bombing of the Al-Khobar building in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, the New York Times noted that those arrested confessed to serving with Bosnian Muslim forces. Further, the captured men also admitted to ties with Osama bin Laden. In 1999, the press reported that bin Laden and his Tunisian assistant Marez Ayadouni were granted citizenship and Bosnian passports in 1993 by the government in Sarajevo. The Bosnian government denied this information following the September 11 attacks, but it was later found that Ayadouni was arrested in Turkey and that at that time he possessed the Bosnian passport. Following this revelation, a new explanation was given that bin Laden did not personally collect his Bosnian passport and that officials at the Bosnian embassy in Vienna, which issued the passport, could not have known who bin Laden was at the time. The Bosnian daily Oslobođenje published in 2001 that 3 men, believed to be linked to bin Laden, were arrested in Sarajevo in July 2001. The 3, one of whom was identified as Imad el-Misri, were Egyptian nationals. The paper said that 2 of the suspects were holding Bosnian passports. The head of Albania's State Intelligence Service, SHISH, Fedos Klosi, said that Osama was running a terror network in Albania to take part in the Kosovo War under the guise of a humanitarian organization, and it was reported to have been started in 1994. Claude Cater, who was a member, testified its existence during his trial. By 1998, 4 members of Egyptian Islamic Jihad, EIJ, were arrested in Albania and extradited to Egypt. The Mujahideen fighters were organized by Islamic leaders in Western Europe allied to him and Zawahiri. During his trial at the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia, former Serbian President Slobodan Milosevic quoted from a purported FBI report that bin Laden's Al-Qaeda had a presence in the Balkans and aided the Kosovo Liberation Army. He claimed bin Laden had used Albania as a launchpad for violence in the region and Europe. He claimed that they had informed Richard Holbrooke that KLA was being aided by Al-Qaeda, but the U.S. decided to cooperate with the KLA and thus indirectly with Osama despite the 1998 United States Embassy bombings earlier. Milosevic had argued that the United States aided the terrorists, which culminated in its backing of the 1999 NATO bombing of Yugoslavia during the Kosovo War. God knows it did not cross our minds to attack the towers, but after the situation became unbearable, and we witnessed the injustice and tyranny of the American-Israeli alliance against our people in Palestine and Lebanon, I thought about it. And the events that affected me directly were that of 1982 and the events that followed, when America allowed the Israelis to invade Lebanon, helped by the U.S. Sixth Fleet. As I watched the destroyed towers in Lebanon, it occurred to me punish the unjust the same way, to destroy towers in America so it could taste some of what we are tasting and to stop killing our children and women. After his initial denial, in the wake of the attacks, bin Laden announced, "What the United States is tasting today is nothing compared to what we have tasted for decades. Our Ummah has known this humiliation and contempt for over 80 years. Its sons are killed, its blood is spilled, its holy sites are attacked, and it is not governed according to Allah's command. Despite this, no one cares." In response to the attacks, the United States launched the War on Terror to depose the Taliban regime in Afghanistan and capture al-Qaeda operatives, and several countries strengthened their anti-terrorism legislation to preclude future attacks. The CIA's Special Activities Division was given the lead in tracking down and killing or capturing bin Laden. The Federal Bureau of Investigation has stated that classified evidence linking al-Qaeda and bin Laden to the September 11 attacks is clear and irrefutable. The UK government reached a similar conclusion regarding al-Qaeda and Osama bin Laden's culpability for the September 11 attacks, although the government report noted that the evidence presented is not necessarily sufficient to prosecute the case. Bin Laden initially denied involvement in the attacks. On September 16, 2001, bin Laden read a statement later broadcast by Qatar's Al Jazeera satellite channel denying responsibility for the attack. In a videotape recovered by U.S. forces in November 2001 in Jalalabad, bin Laden was seen discussing the attack with Khalid al-Harbi in a way that indicates foreknowledge. The tape was broadcast on various news networks on December 13, 2001. The merits of this translation have been disputed. Arabist Dr. Abdul L.M. Husseini stated, "This translation is very problematic. At the most important places where it is held to prove the guilt of bin Laden, it is not identical with the Arabic." In the 2004 video, bin Laden abandoned his denials without retracting past statements. In it he said he had personally directed the 19 hijackers. In the 18-minute tape, played on Al Jazeera, for days before the American presidential election, bin Laden accused U.S. President George W. Bush of negligence in the hijacking of the planes on September 11. According to the tapes, bin Laden claimed he was inspired to destroy the World Trade Center after watching the destruction of towers in Lebanon by Israel during the 1982 Lebanon War. Through two other tapes aired by Al Jazeera in 2006, Osama bin Laden announced, "I am the one in charge of the 19 brothers. I was responsible for entrusting the 19 brothers with the raids, May 23, 2006. In the tapes he was seen with Ramzi bin al-Shib, as well as two of the 9/11 hijackers, Hamza al-Ghamdi, and Wael al-Shari, as they made preparations for the attacks. Videotape broadcast September 7, 2006. Identified motivations of the September 11 attacks include the support of Israel by the United States, presence of the U.S. military in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and the U.S. enforcement of sanctions against Iraq. On March 16, 1998, Libya issued the first official Interpol arrest warrant against bin Laden and 3 other people. They were charged for killing Sylvan Becker, agent of Germany's Domestic Intelligence Service, the Federal Office for the Protection of the Constitution, in the Terrorism Department, and his wife Vera in Libya on March 10, 1994. Bin Laden was still wanted by the Libyan government at the time of his death. Osama bin Laden was first indicted by a grand jury of the United States on June 8, 1998, on charges of conspiracy to attack defense utilities of the United States, and prosecutors further charged that bin Laden was the head of the terrorist organization called al-Qaeda, and that he was a major financial backer of Islamic fighters worldwide. On November 4, 1998, Osama bin Laden was indicted by a federal grand jury in the United States District Court for the Southern District of New York, on charges of murder of U.S. nationals outside the United States, conspiracy to murder U.S. nationals outside the United States, and attacks on a federal facility resulting in death for his alleged role in the 1998 United States Embassy bombings in Kenya and Tanzania. The evidence against bin Laden included courtroom testimony by former al-Qaeda members and satellite phone records, from a phone purchased for him by al-Qaeda procurement agent Ziad Khalil in the United States. However, the Taliban ruled not to extradite bin Laden on the grounds that there was insufficient evidence published in the indictments and that non-Muslim courts lacked standing to try Muslims. Bin Laden became the 456th person listed on the FBI 10 Most Wanted Fugitives list, when he was added on June 7, 1999, following his indictment along with others for capital crimes in the 1998 embassy attacks. Attempts at assassination and requests for the extradition of bin Laden from the Taliban of Afghanistan were met with failure before the bombing of Afghanistan in October 2001. In 1999, U.S. President Bill Clinton convinced the United Nations to impose sanctions against Afghanistan in an attempt to force the Taliban to extradite him. On October 10, 2001, bin Laden appeared as well on the initial list of the top 22 FBI most wanted terrorists, which was released to the public by the President of the United States, George W. Bush, in direct response to the September 11 attacks, but which was again based on the indictment for the 1998 embassy attack. Bin Laden was among a group of 13 fugitive terrorists wanted on that latter list for questioning about the 1998 embassy bombings. Bin Laden remains the only fugitive ever to be listed on both FBI fugitive lists. Despite the multiple indictments listed above and multiple requests, the Taliban refused to extradite Osama bin Laden. However, they did offer to try him before an Islamic court if evidence of Osama bin Laden's involvement in the September 11 attacks was provided. It was not until 8 days after the bombing of Afghanistan began in October 2001 that the Taliban finally did offer to turn over Osama bin Laden to a third-party country for trial in return for the United States ending the bombing. This offer was rejected by President Bush, stating that this was no longer negotiable, with Bush responding, "There's no need to discuss innocence or guilt. We know he's guilty." On June 15, 2011, federal prosecutors of the United States of America officially dropped all criminal charges against Osama bin Laden following his death in May.